Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Today we have I suppose it's part 3, but it is the Patreon Q&A, our exclusive, not exclusive Patreon Q&A.
Yep.
For all the Harbour Unboxed VIPs, all of the upper citizens.
Yep.
I'm pissing off everyone now in the main YouTube channel. But yeah, so if you are interested in becoming a Patreon member, you can subscribe. It is a $1 US a month to be part of the Q&A part of it, I suppose. Yep. Though you sort of need access to Discord, so it's $2. We kind of scammed you guys there. Maybe we should... Anyway.
Doesn't matter what it costs. Just come sign up. Come say hi to us in the Discord.
Yeah, it's a really awesome community. So, yeah, I've probably botched that intro. But let's use it anyway. Roll the tape. All right, first question for the Patreon Q&A. Will Tim be doing any reviews on AMD-powered T-series of ThinkPads? I would like to see those personally.
I would like to test more AMD laptops, but they tend to be fairly difficult to find. So, yeah, I like to test laptops whenever we see a new CPU or GPU series, so we can sort of update our numbers and give you a general idea of how those things are going to perform. So, yeah, if there's any new ThinkPads with new AMD chips, I'll try and get them, but they can be quite difficult to find. So that's why you haven't seen any 3000 series content yet. All right, another question about laptops apparently. If you are looking to prioritize battery life for a laptop, which is to be used mostly for work but with a bit of gaming on the side, will getting a laptop with something like an RTX 2080 Max-Q compromise battery life in any way when using Optimus graphics, i.e. higher idle power consumption, or will there be no difference in power consumption between a 1660 Ti and RTX 2080 Max-Q in Optimus mode for basic tasks like web browsing using the Intel integrated GPU? So as far as I'm aware, when Optimus is enabled and you're using it for just desktop use on the Intel GPU, the discrete GPU is fully switched off. So it's completely power gated and doesn't consume any power. I can't say I've done a lot of testing into sort of your idle power consumption, and I don't really battery benchmark gaming laptops a lot because I figure you're going to use them plugged in because that's where you get maximum performance. But from what I understand, Optimus mode does fully switch off that GPU, so there shouldn't be a disadvantage from getting an RTX 2080 Max-Q over the lower end ones, but you should probably check out someone that's benchmarked that to make sure.
I don't
always
know
look at your testing.
Yeah, Jared from Jared's Tech may have done that.
Yeah, he'd be good to get some things on. If you don't know
Jared's Tech, type in Jared's Tech in the search. He'll come up. Check his channel out. There's a crap ton of laptop info there. And Jared may even hop in the comment section here because he often comments on our videos, and maybe he'll be able to answer that one for you. So then you can just click on his username and go straight there. So there you go, Jared. Convenient way to get people to your channel.
Jeremy asks, what are your views on microtransactions in video games? I think we pretty much have the same opinion on this one.
Yeah, I personally have no problem with microtransactions at all. Like a game that comes to mind, like Fortnite, for example, so you can buy skins for guns and characters and emotes and all kinds of things like that, and it's not pay to win. I mean, there are some skins that are harder to see than others, but generally it's like, yeah, you can just play with the default skin and it's the same experience. The guns aren't better or anything like that, so it's not pay to win basically. So yeah, microtransactions that aren't pay to win, I have no problem with.
Yep, I think that's fair enough. What about loot boxes? Fine with loot boxes?
Well, again, if it's pay to win loot boxes, then yeah, but if it's like...
I'd prefer if it was more upfront, but I can sort of understand why they would do it. As long as it's not pay to win, then...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, loot boxes is just like lucky dip.
Yeah, lucky dip skins is fine.
Yeah, it's fine, I suppose. It's kind of... I mean, is it gambling more so than just buying the skin?
I don't know.
I just think the pay to win stuff's crap. I think it's that simple. Now that TVs are getting better and better for gaming, lower input latency, 120 hertz, variable refresh rate, etc., would you consider doing reviews for some TVs? I think I've asked you about this before. I'd love to know your thoughts on the LG C9 series specifically, although I realise it's probably too expensive. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Right now, not really considering doing TV reviews because I'm spending enough time doing the monitor reviews. I don't really have enough time to look at an entire new product category as well. And we're sort of still developing our monitor testing and getting that off the ground to begin with. So I could review TVs, it'd be interesting, but it takes a lot of time because you need to have comparisons. You need to go out and test a lot of different TVs. TVs are massive, so they're much more difficult.
Your house is already struggling to hold all the computer monitors.
I'm reviewing a 43-inch Asus monitor at the moment. Even that's like pretty big in my test space. So trying to get like a 65-inch TV in there would be difficult. But there's lots of people that do good TV testing out there. HD TV test and ratings do really good reviews. So I'd suggest you just read their stuff because it's pretty good.
All right, another question here. We all know both of you love benchmarking, but what about bench pressing? With what you do, how do you both stay fit? I'm sure a lot of us spending 10 plus hours on a computer some days. I could use some tips for staying in shape. Well, don't come to me.
No, I'm useless for that.
I used to play a lot of sport, do a fair bit of gym work, but that was 15 years ago. So, I do enjoy getting out and doing a bit of stuff. It's been hard with the YouTube channel. For the last 3 years, I've just been on the YouTube grind. Doesn't really leave a lot of time for anything else. But last year, I made the decision. I bought a kayak, so a pedal-powered kayak. I started doing a lot of fishing, try and lose a bit of weight and get back to where I should be at. I'm also building a home gym later this year, so I will be doing a little bit of bench pressing. Not big numbers though, low FPS. And what about you, Tim?
Does it look like
Tim's young, so he's a default at the moment on the fitness.
Yeah, no, it obviously looks like I'm not that fit, so I think that probably explains, am I going to be good for advice? No.
But I mean, obviously the way to stay fit, it's pretty well worked out at the moment. Eat healthy and do a bit of exercise. So I eat pretty healthy, but the exercise eludes me at this point in time. But hopefully you'll be able to get a bit more. It's coming into summer soon in Australia, so much more kayak fishing, and that'll help me burn a few kgs there.
Nice.
But not a fitness channel.
Next question. Have you tried messing with the CPU affinity while benchmarking or just in general? I've been using a program called Process Lasso and had some fun testing out games, various core and thread counts, 2 versus 4 threads, 6 versus 8, and seeing how it affects performance. So I think you've done some of that with the Threadripper stuff. Yeah,
I mean, the core stuff that you mentioned, obviously I have a whole heap of CPUs with different configurations of the same architecture, so we've sort of done core and thread scaling stuff in the past. I did a bit of core affinity stuff and played around with the 2990WX. That was pretty interesting. We were really just using it to work out what was going on there. It's a cool tool.
Yep.
It can be quite useful, but it's not probably it'd be a sort of a specific specialized content piece. It wouldn't be something that we would use often. I think with the exception of the 2990WX, I haven't really used that sort of stuff before in a video. Steve, last weekend you cooked Tim a steak. Actually, it might have been last weekend when they asked this question, but it was like 3 weekends ago now because it was the last time we did a Q&A. Have you tried, how's it pronounced? It's sous vide, I think it is, steak. If not, would you give it a try? I actually had have you heard of it before?
Yeah, I've had a sous vide steak. I've cooked one before.
Oh, well, here I am just living in the country, not knowing anything about sous vide
steaks.
Right. Well, I'd never actually heard of them before, didn't know it was a thing, so I Googled it, watched a YouTube tutorial, and I'm like, I want to do that.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
We'll have one next Q&A next month. We actually had steaks today again for lunch. I made some other things, but steak was the main course. Was it good?
Yeah, it was good, yeah.
What are you laughing about?
I just started talking about all your courses that you make me.
Well, we didn't have just one thing, did we?
Well, I guess.
So what do you laugh?
Anyway, keep going.
I'm done. You've offended me now.
All right, Nick asks, the reboot of Codemasters Grid franchise is coming soon. It'll be using the same Ego engine that F1 and Dirt already use, but it's a pretty big game release in a year without a ton of major releases. What are your thoughts on testing multiple games running the same engine? Is it worth it to test various implementations of an engine, or is there some merit to an approach of just testing a single game for each engine? And at what point does adding games to the 40-game test suite just become padding?
I think for the smaller game samples, so like our day one reviews, for example, where I only test about a dozen games, 12 to 13 games, I think there I would probably try and avoid using multiple game engines.
Multiple games that use the same engine, right?
That's what I mean.
Yep.
Having said that, though, it depends on how popular the game is, and if we get like, well, I don't know, say 3 new games came out that were really popular AAA titles, and they all use the same game engine, I'd probably use those 3.
Like Frostbite or Unreal, that could conceivably have a lot of popular games at any one time.
Yeah. But I think, it's a tough one. I'd try and avoid it unless, there was a reason to include those games. But for the 30-plus game benchmarks, I just include everything and anything, really. So if it's a relatively new AAA title, it's not basically anything that's not a flop, I'll include in those.
Yeah.
So I try to include games that have been released this year and the previous year. And I think the only exception I'd make is if it's a Windows Store game, because Forza Horizon 4 drives it's like an 80 gig download, and I have to do it so often because it just like craps out.
Yeah, just wait for Gears 5. That'll probably be 200 gig.
Yeah,
knowing the last one.
Yeah, we're probably going to have to test that for a while. I was pretty happy to drop Gears 4, but anyway. All right, question here from Ibslice. I think he's asking me the way it's phrased. He says, Steve, are you and Tim going to ever do another PC build-off? So we did one for our Computex PCs. If you missed that, it was a pretty fun live stream. Anyway, perhaps one where the Patreon members pick the parts. Basically. Oh, sorry, and the loser has to go to the winner's house for the following Q&A. So they have to endure the 3 to 4 hour drive.
Yeah.
We definitely want to do another live stream build-off because that was a heap of fun. We both really enjoyed that. It's pretty hard to do it at my place because my studio here is pretty small and cramped. Tim has a much bigger area for recording, so it'd probably have to be at Tim's anyway. But maybe we can organise that.
Yeah.
It was good fun.
Should be fun. So, Cool Moose wants some upgrade advice here. So, if you had an 1800X, a GTX 1080, 2 times 8GB DDR4, I'm assuming 3200, on an X470 Gaming Plus for streaming your games and recording you play to then edit later using Vegas Pro, what would you upgrade first, if anything? So gaming at 1440p, recording at 1080, streaming 900p, and the max budget is $500 US.
Well, that's a tough one. Depends on the games you play, and then I suppose, really, are you mostly GPU or CPU limited? Without knowing that, if you work that out, it's pretty obvious what you should upgrade, your CPU or your GPU. But I think if you sort of have to ask the question, do I need to upgrade at all? The answer is probably no.
Yeah, it's a decent build as is.
It's a decent build as is. Like, for example, Ryzen 7 1800X. Really, the only thing worth replacing that with would be a 3900X. But if you're not CPU limited, you're just wasting $500 US, which is your entire budget here. But for the CPU, 3900X is really the only thing that's going to give you a noticeable upgrade.
I mean, and there would be somewhat of a reason to upgrade because you are game streaming, you are editing videos, and that's where a 3900X would be useful.
Yeah, it would be.
But you could go down the GPU route as well.
But as I said, it depends on the game you're playing.
Yeah.
If the game's not very CPU demanding, then the CPU can just handle the streaming aspect of it and let you game. And then as for GPU again, what was it? Was it 1080p that we were talking about for?
Games at 1440p, he has a GTX 1080.
Yeah, see, a 1080's still a good GPU. So you've got a $500 budget, so that really means 2070 Super. And I think they're about 25% faster than a GTX 1080. That's probably at 1440p. It'd be similar at 1080p. We're not CPU limited. But the value of the 5700 XT is just a lot better. It's a $400 GPU. It's only like 6% slower, probably less at 1080p. And that would be about 20% faster than what you've got with a GTX 1080. So if you're not heavily GPU limited, getting 20% more performance may not be that beneficial for $400. It's not a huge leap. I probably wouldn't. Yeah, I'd work out whether you are GPU or CPU limited and do you need to upgrade at all. Oh, God. I knew we were going to get a really serious question here. Okay, I'll read this one out from Bill Nye, the Triggered Guy. Steve and Tim, if you two are in a fight to the death, who would come out as the victor? It's a trick question, this one. I reckon it depends on how long Tim could outrun me for. So if the answer's 5 minutes, probably Tim would win. I'd just crumble into a pile of my own sweat.
Yeah, I think it also depends on our starting positions, because if we both start really close together, then you're a much bigger guy than me, so you'd probably quickly kill me. Whereas if we were like much further apart, I reckon I'd have a decent chance.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll try it one day. We'll see who wins and who's dead. If it just one of us turns up for the Q&A, you'll have your answer.
Yep.
Moving on. All right, this question isn't really addressed to either of us, or perhaps it's both of us. But anyway, what would you consider to be the best tempered glass PC case?
That's pretty good.
Was it the question best or biggest?
Best.
Oh, best. I do love the 1000D. I like the Corsair Crystal 570X that we use for the GPU test system as well. Airflow's not too bad in that, considering the thing's wrapped in glass. Not optimal either, but then we're talking about tempered glass cases here. Yeah, really, I don't have a favourite. It depends on the build and what I want to do with it. Like, for example, I love the Thermaltake Core P3. So that got upgraded to have a tempered glass sheet that goes over the front of it. I love wall mounting that case. It looks cool. It's kind of practical, at least it is for me, keeping it all neat and off the desk. But there's way too many high quality PC cases. There's too many nice looking ones. There's too many that I would like to use.
Yep.
Anything for you to add to that one?
No, I generally quite like the Corsair ranges. Like, we obviously do a lot of work with Corsair as is, but I've all the time I've been building PCs, I've always used a Corsair case because I like the design the most out of most of the manufacturers. They just, whatever they do with their design team, I quite like.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that the 570X is good. I'm using the 550D, which 500D, something like that.
Yeah, 500D.
Yeah, something like that, which is quite nice as well. So, yeah, lots of options.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a particular brand that I love. I mean, I agree with your comments on Corsair, but I've played with a lot of tempered glass Fantex cases. I think they're cool. Fractal Design makes some cool cases. There's some Thermaltake ones I don't mind. And the list of brands goes on, really. Yeah.
Steve, have you ever considered trying an 8350 with a 2080 Ti at 4K?
No, can't say I have. All right, question here. Do you ever go to events in Europe? Are there any that are worth your while? Seems like most people go to the US or USA or Asia, and stuff like GDC is for the gaming publications. So I don't love travel myself. Tim doesn't mind it. I kind of hate airports. I've got no problem with going on a plane. I just can't be bothered doing the whole business to get on the plane. And then for the kind of work we do, the time away from the benchmark lab just hurts the channel and our content. And I don't think it's stuff you guys particularly... We're not a vlog channel. So vlogging trips and events and that, we do Computex because it's relatively close and it is a massive event for us. CPU, GPU news, all that sort of stuff. You've been to a few events in Europe though, haven't you?
I've been to a few. When I was doing more stuff with phones, I've been to MWC, which is in Barcelona, a few times, and that was fine. So yeah, I'd be up for going to Europe. It's just that most of the ones that we'd be going to aren't there.
Yeah.
I think maybe Gamescom is the only one. Is Gamescom there? There's a European one?
I have no idea.
One of those games trade shows is over there.
Yeah.
For developers and all that. So.
Well, that was what's GDC?
That's the other one, I think.
Game Developer Con?
Yeah, there's two different ones.
I don't know.
Anyway.
I don't follow that stuff.
Purple asks, any chances of testing the XL2546? I watched the KD25F video and I'm stuck on deciding between the two. The new monitor benchmark overall made me rethink my choice of the XL2546 because of the, all the response time stuff and error percent and all that. Yeah, I mean, I'm always up for testing any sort of monitor. When it comes to testing two monitors, they're sort of very similar. I try and, test a lot of different types of monitors because I think that makes the content broad and it's a bit more interesting. So if there's two that are very similar, I don't really go out and hunt for both of the same monitors. So it would just depend on, I think that's an Acer monitor, but yeah, it just depends what people are willing to send out really. So if they want to send out that particular monitor, I'll test it. But if not, then yeah, most of what I would have covered with the KD25F will largely, carry over if they use the same panel. So that's the benefit of displays all using the same sort of panel. So yeah, I guess that answers that and why we don't cover every single monitor, because if we covered every single monitor, it would just be monitor reviews on the channel because there's so many.
All right, we've got a question here. I'm just going to chuck the actual question up on the screen because it's a long one, and we won't read all of it. But basically, the meat of the question is, will I be doing an updated Ryzen 3000 test with manually tuned memory and compare that to Intel with manually tuned memory and in some titles? Short answer is yes, I'm working on that. I actually have the latest Trident Z G-Skill memory. It's the 3600 CL14 memory. So I'll be manually tuning this up on both Intel and AMD, and we'll see how a heap of games pan out. But yeah, so I'll be doing that, and it should be good. Now, just a quick one here. Is there any chance we see VR benchmarks? We will not see VR benchmarks on Hardware Unboxed, at least at this point in time. Not super interested in VR, and benchmarking or testing on VR is pretty difficult anyway.
Still very niche market.
Very niche. I don't think there's much demand. But as I said, if it really interests me, I was really passionate about it, you'd be seeing it. But yeah, we kind of only do the content we enjoy, because if we're passionate about it and enjoy it, then hopefully you guys enjoy watching it.
All right, Steve, what would you prefer for reading voltages, hardware info or a voltmeter?
What would I prefer, or what would be better? Well, reading from an MLCC cap underneath the CPU socket with a multimeter is definitely the most accurate method, but it's also just a massive pain in the backside, and it's also a bit risky, so you can easily damage the motherboard doing that. So that would be a bit inconvenient. I think the AMD SVI2 voltage, that sensor's really accurate anyway. I've been using it for the X570 board testing, and it seems very accurate. I spoke to Buildzoid about using that sensor, and he said it should be quite accurate, so there shouldn't be a problem using that. So yeah, obviously, multimeter method would be better. Also, the voltage points they provide on the motherboard, they're not necessarily accurate either, so you really have to use an MLCC cap. And yeah, as I said, it's a bit risky, and it is a massive pain in the backside, and that testing is already difficult enough as it is. Is there any difference between FreeSync and FreeSync 2 other than LFC? Also, is it worth upgrading from V64 to 5700 XT for 1440p gaming? Well, no. For the second part of that, no. If you've got Vega 64, I'd just keep that. I don't think I'd bother upgrading to a 5700 XT, spending another $400, probably not worth it.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. As for FreeSync and FreeSync 2, one of the main things that FreeSync 2 introduces is the GPU side HDR tone mapping. So basically, when you get a FreeSync 2 display, that will send metadata to the GPU that tells it all of its color properties, brightness properties, contrast, and then the GPU can then do all the processing for HDR. So you're saving a bit of input lag in the chain, because sometimes HDR monitors can be really slow at processing HDR. So you cut that out, put it on the GPU side, but it needs to be in supported games. So you might have only seen FreeSync 2 support in games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I think Far Cry has it as well, Far Cry 5 that is. So yeah, that is the other main difference there. A lot of people tend to forget about it because it's only in supported games, one of those doesn't work all the time features, but that is another thing that AMD thought was a cool thing, and kind of is, but needs a bit more game support. This is another monitor question from Science. This is a really interesting one. This is one that I thought a long time about when it first popped up in the Discord chat, so I'll read it out. Since shades of colours are unique colours too, I always wondered why for colour critical work, IPS panels, which only really excel at a rather shadeless aspect of colour accuracy but are touted as the best for this use case, even though VA and OLED comes very close in terms of colour coverage while also providing much more accurate shade detail. Wouldn't a 3000:1 contrast ratio VA panel technically be more accurate than a 1000:1 contrast ratio IPS panel, assuming identical otherwise coverage? So yeah, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. So firstly, the reason why I say that IPS panels are best for color critical work is not just because of its colors. They also have the best uniformity and the best viewing angles. So when you're trying to do any sort of color critical work and you might not quite be viewing your monitor directly on, you still want the color quality to be very accurate, and IPS provides the best of that. And then just generally from what I've seen, for some reason IPS panels tend to be more uniform. So the edges are as good as the center. VA panels can be pretty dodgy with that, especially the mid-tier sort of gaming panels. So those are really the reasons why I think IPS is the best for color critical work. As for the contrast ratio question, yes, a VA panel will be more accurate, but probably not as much of a difference as you might think. It'll only really impact the very low black shades. It doesn't really scale all of the grayscale, say, up in the range because it can't get really black. It doesn't scale everything and ruin your sort of mid grays and whites. When I've done plenty of testing, and all of the testing that I've done always sets the black target to be 0, because ideally you would want your blacks to be, the screen off like an OLED. So all of the testing that I've ever done has had that set to 0. So the only real difference you will see is right at that bottom end of the grayscale, like 5%, 2% black is where the difference in accuracy will be. Everything above that, which an IPS panel can do perfectly fine, is still perfectly fine and accurate. So yeah, if you're really interested in super accurate shadows, then yes, a VA will be better, but I think every other aspect is superior from an IPS panel, which is why they tend to be recommended. Sal asks, what are your thoughts about Intel's real-world benchmarks showing the 9900K and even 9700K beating the 3900X in just about every single workload that isn't Cinebench?
Yeah, well, it's just garbage, isn't it? Garbage marketing. I think it's fair to say Intel's probably getting a bit desperate at this point. And then, when this is a desperate tactic, basically. So obviously you guys watching you'll take anything Intel says with a grain of salt. You should just, read or watch professional reviews. There's plenty of them. And as far as I'm aware, they all say pretty much the same things when it comes to comparing Zen 2 with the current Coffee Lake CPUs.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of the areas that they were sort of really hammering into are stuff that is either negligible difference or kind of irrelevant. Like in terms of gaming, the 9900K, 9700K, they're faster.
Yep.
But you're talking about a very small margin to begin with, and then in most situations that gamers play, higher resolutions, 1440p, mid-range GPUs, not much of a difference. And then when it comes to stuff like Microsoft Word and Google Chrome, it's like any decent CPU on a desktop these days is more than powerful enough to run Microsoft Word. So
yeah, exactly.
It's like, who cares how that performs? No one is buying a new Ryzen CPU with 12 cores and going, my Microsoft Word performance is going to be so much better here. Like, they're just irrelevant.
A good example of that would be the workloads we do, the workflow. So we use Premiere. It's a video editing software, and there's some aspects where the Intel CPUs are better at some aspects of editing, whereas the Ryzen processor's better at others. But I mean, overall, it's much of a muchness. So I wouldn't really argue either way. However, when you go to encode the video, there is quite a significant difference between the 3900X and the 9700K, which was the example they were giving. I made a few notes here. I don't actually have the slides in front of me. I should have copied those because I can't remember exactly what they said. But in my own benchmarks, the 3900X reduced the encode time by 30% over the 9700K. And that means, so if you've got a 4K video that takes the 3900X 40 minutes to render, it's going to take the 9700K an hour. So that's 20 minutes. That's not nothing. Whereas when you're editing the video and there's those nanosecond differences, you're not really going to notice those. You're going to be the bottleneck there. Your input's going to be the slow part. But there, when it comes to encoding, you'll notice a big difference there from all the extra cores and threads. I just thought it was funny that I think the first main slide that I saw, it said something like, I think, was it benchmark relevancy or something like that?
Yeah, they were saying like Cinebench is irrelevant.
Yeah, they were saying Cinebench is irrelevant, but then they were like pointing to a heap of Intel commissioned synthetic benchmarks.
Yeah, and ones that are like heavily synthetic, like Spec Int and WebEx PRT and stuff. And it's like,
so as I said, it's just marketing garbage.
I mean, I've never, like, Intel has kind of sort of recently come out with this point about how, real world users are just like browsing the web and using Word and Excel and doing some light photo editing. Like, this is what they say on their slide.
So let's get a G4560.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like, people aren't buying a 3900X because it's better at light video, like light photo editing.
It's silly, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like, that's not the target market, and gaming isn't the only thing people are buying these CPUs for. There are lots of people out there who are genuinely buying these CPUs for video encoding, and Intel is saying like, yeah, you should either be using like a render farm, which I think was in their slide, or a workstation CPU. That they're saying like that is your use case. But there are some people out there that aren't going to spend $800 plus on a workstation CPU, and then all the additional costs related with the motherboard platform, all that sort of thing. So
the whole thing's silly, and
so like sure, if you're working for Pixar, you're going to be doing your 3D rendering on a server farm. But if you're a home user where these workflows are actually important for some people, they're not irrelevant. And Cinebench being part of Cinema 4D is not an irrelevant benchmark.
Basically, the slides were misleading and garbage, but I don't take too much issue with them because I expect nothing less from a company's marketing department.
Pretty much.
If they had mailed these out to reviewers and they were trying to convince reviewers to stop using Cinebench and start using Intel-commissioned benchmark software, then we'd probably make a dedicated video about that and take issue with it. But as far as it stands, it's nowhere near a principled technologies type deal. It's like almost not worth even our time.
Every company, when they come out with a new product, is always trying to get you to test it in the way they want you to test it.
Nothing new.
Similar with the 2990WX from AMD, all their benchmark data was from like
rendering
software. So it's like it goes both ways with this stuff. Everyone wants their product shown in a favorable light, and they'll always do stuff that will favor them. So it's no surprise Intel wants to show gaming and Google Chrome usage as things that are important.
Yeah, and they're not technically wrong about those things, but it's just like it's less relevant than the relevant benchmarks. Anyway, it's just all a bit silly.
Next question. Do you think the RX 5700 XT is a worthwhile upgrade over the 980 Ti? Also, how long do you think the 980 Ti will be good for 1080p?
I haven't done any direct comparison. I should revisit the 980 Ti, but we know the 980 Ti, when it's overclocked, it's about as fast or a smidgen faster than like a GTX 1070. Maybe as fast as like a factory overclocked GTX 1070. And then we know a GTX 1080 is around 20% faster than the 1070. And then that would put the 5700 XT, that's about 20% faster than the 1080. So I don't know, 30-40% performance uplift from going from the 980 Ti to a 5700 XT. So that's a fairly significant performance uplift, but it will be game dependent, and what was it, 1080p? Yeah, you probably should see around a 30% uplift still at 1080p. Again, it depends on the game and are you CPU limited or not. But that seems like a reasonable upgrade. It'll definitely give you a noticeable performance increase, and it's the best value mid-range graphics card right now. Cost per frame, it can't be beat. Do you see AMD knocking the 2080 Ti off the throne with big Navi? For example, the alleged Radeon 5950 XT. Looking at Navi pricing and looking back at the Radeon 7 pricing, could we expect this 2080 Ti killer to retail below the price of said GPU? Well, the Radeon 7 is kind of a bad example of AMD pricing because they just had to charge that for it. Like, that wasn't really the ideal product to offer. It was a really compute-heavy GPU that wasn't really that suitable for gaming. So they really couldn't charge any less than the $700 that they did for that card. As for knocking off the 2080 Ti, I think it's certainly possible, and you'd probably agree in saying that you'd really hope they can do that, because it's going to suck if they can't on the 7nm process. But no idea on that one. Even for pricing as well. Like I said, the Radeon 7's a bad example, but who knows what AMD could do with pricing.
Yeah.
All right, last question here. What part of a game did you pick for benchmarking that also turned out to be very fun to play over and over? None. Games are fun playing once and then maybe a replay a year later. But replaying the same section 3 times back to back to get one result, and then doing it again and again and again, and then we're like 100, 101, 100. There's no... And you're also not really playing the game. I think that's where there is a bit of confusion with benchmarking, like what you're actually doing. So you're benchmarking a section of the game that hopefully is quite demanding and pushes the hardware to its limits, but it also has to be highly repetitive. So the absolute most demanding sections of a game may not be repeatable with a great degree of accuracy, so they're not suitable for benchmarking. But with a benchmark run, you're not flipping around and shooting people and doing stuff and having a bit of fun and practicing your aim. You're literally just following a path. You're walking from A to B, and there may be a few steps along the way, but it's a controlled benchmark path. So
stop and shoot a bit.
Yeah, it depends on the test what's involved. Like for Watch Dogs 2, I started at a checkpoint, I jumped in a certain car, and then I drove 60 seconds down the road, and that was the benchmark pass. It depends on the game, but yeah, they're not fun at all. What's fun for me is getting the results and comparing hardware. Yeah. Well, that is going to do it. That is actually all the questions that were asked. We did all of the Patreon questions, so go us. I think it was like 26 or something, and if you watched all of them, you're equally awesome, let's say.
Yep. Nice.
But yeah, big thank you to everyone who watched it. Big thank you to our lovely Patreon members. And that is going to do it for this one. We'll be back to regular content after this. I think Tim has
got some builds, got some monitor reviews.
Got a 1080p budget build, some monitor reviews, standard Tim stuff, and I don't know, I'll find something to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.